Hi everybody, I'm Bia, and welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. For those of you who might not know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritist teachings and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and is more relatable to us as teenagers in today's society. Last week, we finished off Chapter 9 of the third part of the Spirit's book, so now we're on to Chapter 10, which is the Law of Freedom. So, if you haven't been around, we've been going through different moral laws that when we follow completely, that will mean we're at perfection when we're following all of these moral laws to their full extent, and not human laws that are always changing, God's laws that never change, that are very consistent. So today, we'll be talking about the Law of Freedom, and the first section in this chapter is titled Natural Freedom. So question 825. Are there positions in the world in which persons can flatter themselves by believing they are enjoying absolute freedom? So, is there ways that a person could think that they have absolute freedom? That they fully are completely free? And the spirits answered, no, because all of you, the least as well as the greatest, need one another. So, no, because no matter who you are, you need each other. We need other people. And maybe that's just one other person we need. Maybe it's a lot of people we need. We need our connection with God and with the other spirits to help us. So, no, you're never going to be absolutely free because everyone, no matter who you are, if you're the least, if you're the greatest, you still need someone. So you're not free. You still have a connection to someone. Question 826. What would be a condition in which humans could enjoy absolute freedom? So, okay, if we always need someone, then what would be a condition where we don't need someone? Because even if you want to say, oh, I don't need anyone, if you go to the supermarket, you still need those people who are putting stuff on the shelf. If you're going to the store, you still need the cashier. So where would we be absolutely free? And the spirits answered, that of a hermit in the desert. As soon as two individuals are brought together, there are rights to respect. They no longer have absolute freedom. So really, it would be only in the middle of the desert by yourself would you have absolute freedom. Because whenever there's one other person there, you're not free because you have to be respectful. Think about it. Just because there's say there's a person right next to me right now. I don't have absolute freedom because this person's here, I'm going to be considerate with what I do, what I wear, how I speak. So just because one person's here, now I'm not free anymore. And it's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing, of course. But because this one person's here, now I'm changing the way I'm acting so I can be respectful towards that person. So you'll only be absolutely free, like they're saying here, kind of metaphorically, that if you're like a hermit in the desert, then you'll be free, but you'll have absolute freedom. But besides that, we always are depending on someone and changing to what the other people around us. Question 827. Does the duty of respecting the rights of others deprive individuals of the rights pertaining to themselves? So here the question is saying, so we have this duty to respect the rights of others and what others people have. But so they're saying, does respecting what other people have and their rights, does that take away from our individual rights? Because like we were saying, say there's a person next to me. Oh, now I can't wear whatever I want. Now I have to wear something respectable. Now I have to wear clothes. You can't just sit here naked while there's someone else right next to you. So just because we're respecting their rights, are we taking away from our rights? That's what the question's asking. And the spirits answered, absolutely not. For they are rights that have been granted to them by nature. So no, we're not taking away our rights, and we are respecting their rights, but we're not taking away our rights. We're just still being respectful and considerate. And these are rights that were granted to them by nature. A human can't just take away rights that were granted by nature. Question 828. How can we reconcile the liberal opinion of certain men when their frequent despotism in their own homes and over their subordinates. So now I'm just saying, okay, so what do we think of these men who and even some women today, of course when this book was written, men dominated the home, but now of course even women too, who have this despotism, which I looked up, and it means the exercise of absolute power. So, and it could be in a cruel and oppressive way. So these people who have all this power in their own house and over anyone who lives there, whether it's their kids or whether it's some relatives or whether they have some workers also living in the house. So what do we feel about these liberal opinions that people want to be tough and superior in their house and kind of taking over? And the spirits answered, in these instances, although they have intelligent understanding of natural law, it is offset by pride and selfishness. They know what they should do, but they do not practice it. They make their principles as well calculated farce. So here what we think is that these people who are kind of ruling other people, and we'll get more into this later, but even like slavery, having these people at your home and thinking you're so much more powerful than them and you can tell them what to do and control the other people who are lower than you, subordinates. And basically this opinion, they know the natural law, they know what they should do, but they're offset by pride and selfishness about things that they want for their own self and not thinking about other people. Then there's a second part to this question, and it says, will the principles they have professed during this life be taken into account in the next? So these people who just want to be rulers in their own home, in their own land, and say whatever they do to be mean or cruel to these other people, will this be taken account into their next life? And the spirits answered, the more intelligence individuals have for understanding a principle, the less excusable they will be if they have not applied it to themselves. I tell you truthfully that simple but sincere persons are more advanced in God's paths than those who try to appear to be what they in fact are not. So yeah, this is gonna affect them, because it's kind of like saying if a baby doesn't know that you have to say please and thank you, it's okay because they're still learning, they don't know yet. But they're trying, they're getting there. That's better than an adult who knows to say please and thank you but chooses not to just out of pride. So that simple example right there, so you're kind of even more at fault because you know the right thing and you're still not doing it. At least a little baby is learning, it still can barely speak, so we're trying to get those words out, those manners. But when the more intelligence you have, you should know to do this. So now you're kind of more at fault. So simple and sincere, kind people have more advancement because, okay, yeah, they're more simple, but they're doing the right things. While those who are more advanced and have more intelligence are doing the wrong thing because of pride and selfishness. So now we're on to the next section of this chapter, still in the Law of Freedom, and this one's titled Slavery. And with the title of the book, there's a little footnote. So if you guys don't know, there's like a little number next to the word slavery, and then it goes to the bottom of the page. So this is just this is just little extra facts and some backgrounds that we'll read through. The Spirit's book, the one we're reading right now, was published in 1857, while slavery was still legally practiced in many parts of the world, including the United States and Brazil. The U.S. State Department publishes an annual report entitled Trafficking in Persons That Are Present, 2006, disclosed the fact that 14 nations are not doing enough to stop international human trafficking. This report covers several forms of trafficking in persons, defined as a. Sex trafficking, which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induces to perform an act that has not attained 18 years of age, or b. the recruitment, harboring, transporting, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services, through the use of force, fraud, or coercion, for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude. So here, that was just giving us some background that while the Spirit's book was being written, slavery was still a thing in Brazil and in the United States. And this slavery, like they said here, there's severe forms of trafficking people, like they said. Like, could be sex trafficking or getting this recruitment for slavery that we kind of learn about in classes, where people are forced to do this, to do labor. And when we learn in the United States, usually on farms in the South, as we've seen. So this is kind of, at the time, imagine if slavery was still happening and you read all this information about slavery. So this at the time was kind of groundbreaking, because already, and we see how we've advanced, because now we know that slavery is wrong and we don't have that. Well, some nations still do have that, just under other titles, but at least we've advanced to abolish slavery. But at the time, this was kind of something that was like groundbreaking, to have some news on slavery, which was currently happening. So question 829. Are there human beings who are meant by nature to be property of others? So by God's law, not by what anyone thinks, but by God, are there human beings who are meant to be slaves, who are meant to be someone else's like object, to work only for that person, to be that person's property? And the Spirit answered, every instance of subjection of one human being to another is contrary to the law of God. Slavery is an abuse of power and will gradually disappear with progress, as will all other abuses. So, no, there's no time that one human being should be the property of another. And when this is happening, that's against God's law. So slavery is an abuse, and like everything else that we have, eventually, as we go learning more and more, it will not exist anymore. And as we can see, even though some of this stuff still does exist underlyingly, at least we've come to the big terms that it's bad as a whole. At least we're progressing, we're moving there, and eventually this type of possession of other people will be gone. And then Allan Kardec puts his own comment in, and he says, any human law that establishes slavery is a law against nature, because it equates people with animal and physically and morally degrades them. So this is against nature because we're treating the other person as an animal, as if they're less than, because we don't have people as our property. We have, sure, some people have animals on their farms, people have land, people have material things, but we don't have people. So it's like we're treating these people as animals and degrading them to something that they're not. So slavery is fully against the law of nature. Question 830. When slavery belongs to the custom of a culture, are those who practice it reprehensible, since they are doing nothing more than following a usage that seems natural to them? So now we're talking not about the people who started slavery or who truly want it, but if it's in the culture and everyone's doing it, then they kind of just follow along and do it, not really thinking about it. So are they also kind of in trouble, let's say? Are they also at fault? And the Spirits answered, evil is always evil. All your sophistry will not render an evil action good. However, the responsibility for evil is relative to the means at your disposal to comprehend it. Those who use the law of slavery are always guilty of violating the law of nature. But in this, as in all things, the guilt is relative. Because slavery was a custom among certain cultures, people practiced it in good faith, as something that seemed natural to them. But their reason, more developed and especially enlightened by the teachings of Christianity, eventually showed them that the slave was their equal before God. Then they had no more excuse. So, evil is always evil. It's always going to be wrong, even if you're just doing it because someone else is doing it. And obviously, I don't expect any of us to kind of relate to this, to have slavery, but we can think of something else. If someone steals something, and then everyone starts stealing. And then I go and steal. Just because everyone's doing it doesn't make it right. I'm still at fault. I'm still going to get in trouble. But and then it depends, like they're saying, the guilt is relative. There could be a person who doesn't know better. Maybe they stole because their family was starving and they really needed it. And that's no excuse. They're still wrong to steal. But that's still wrong to steal, but they didn't have just the malintent of stealing from someone else. But someone who knows that stealing is wrong, doesn't need to steal at all because they have enough money, then you're kind of even more at fault, because now you're just doing it to be selfish. Now you're just doing it to hurt other people. So that's the same thing that we're seeing here. So just because everyone who practiced slavery was wrong, was at fault, but there was some who didn't know better, and they were just kind of doing it because everyone else was doing it, but there was some that knew it was wrong, and they still did it. And so the level of guilt will change, but everyone's at fault. Evil, like they said, is always evil. Question 831. Doesn't the natural inequality of aptitudes place certain people under the subjugation of the more intelligent ones? So it's saying, so doesn't the inequality of aptitudes, so the inequality of our abilities, of our intelligence, doesn't this place people under other people? So think about in school. There's some who are much smarter than others, so it kind of makes them that person on top of those other people. Or if you think in a sport, if someone is much more athletic and really good, it kind of places them above those other people. So doesn't this inequality of what we're able to do kind of place people above or below others? And the spirits answered, yes, in order to enable them to develop, but not to demean them still further by slavery. Human beings have long regarded certain races as domesticated beasts and burdens of whipped by arms and hands, and have thought that they had the right to sell them as such. They had considered themselves to be pure blood. The folly of those who do not look beyond matter. It is not the blood that must be purer or lesser. It's the spirit. So, so we do have these inequalities because we're all on our own paths. We're all different individuals. But this wasn't meant for us to, if I'm the smartest one, then I'm going to pick on the ones that aren't smart. Or if I'm the best athlete, I'm going to pick on the ones. No, it wasn't meant for us to hurt those people or to rule upon those people. None of that. It was meant for, and the slaves, just because it was the whites thought they were better. No, it's not that they were better. They're just different people going through different things. And we know that it's not about the physical body. It's not about how, like here with slavery, it's not about the physical body, or it's not about your blood, that white people had pure blood. No, because deep down we all have the same blood, and it's about the spirit that matters, not the blood, not any material thing. Question 832. There are those who treat their slaves humanely, who allow them to lack nothing, and who think that freedom would expose them to even greater deprivations. What do you say about them? So there was people at the time who had slaves who they treated their slaves well. Of course, they were still slaves. They still could not leave, but they gave them everything. They weren't too mean. And they thought that if I let them go, they'll be even worse than if they just stay here with me and I treat them well. So what do we think about these people? And the spirit said, I say that they understand their own interests very well. They also show the same care for their cattle and horses in order to get more profit at market. They are not as culpable as those who mistreat their slaves, but they nonetheless use them as merchandise, depriving them of the rights to belong to themselves. So here they're saying, they're not as bad as the ones who are truly being cruel and mistreating these people. They're not, like we said, evil is always evil. So this is still wrong, and they're still using these people for profit, and they're still keeping that person even though that person should just belong to themselves. So evil is still evil, but again, the guilt is different. These people, at least they're trying to be kind, at least they're trying to care, to help others, while others are just being right out mean. And now we're on to the next section of this chapter, which is a small one, only 2 questions, and this one's titled Freedom of Thought. So our freedom to think whatever we want to think. Question 833. Is there something in human beings which escapes all constraints and through which they are able to enjoy absolute freedom? So is there something inside of us that escapes, that we can enjoy absolute freedom with this thing? And the spirits answered, it is through thought that they enjoy unlimited freedom. For thought knows no obstacle. Its manifestation may be hindered but not erased. So we can be absolutely free. Like we said, it's almost impossible for us to be absolutely free just as people, because no matter where we are, there's other people that we depend on, that we need to respect. And so there's always other people, but our thought, that's unlimited freedom for us. We can think whatever we want to think. We can think unlimited things. And there's no obstacles to our thought. So, of course, some things may be hindered from us to think about or for us to see into, but it's not going to be erased. Question 834. Are humans responsible for their thoughts? So, is it our thoughts? Are we responsible for our own thoughts? And the spirits answered, they are responsible before God. God alone can know their thoughts and condemn and absolve them according to the divine justice. So, we're responsible for them before God. So, of course, God can still, just because we're thinking it, not saying it out loud, God still has access to that. God can still hear what we're thinking, let's put it that way. So, yeah, we're responsible for our own thoughts, but also God knows what we're thinking too. So, before God as well. And now we're on to the next section, which is titled Freedom of Conscience. Question 835. Is freedom of conscience a consequence of freedom of thought? So now we're talking about our conscience. So is that a consequence of freedom of thought? And the spirits answered, conscience is an inner thought that belongs to persons, as do all of their thoughts. So yeah, your conscience is an inner thought. So yeah, that belongs to your thoughts. So that's related to the whole freedom of thought kind of thing. Question 836. Do humans have the right to set up barriers to freedom of conscience? So can they set up barriers to how free they want their conscience to be? And the spirits answered, no. No more than the freedom of thought, because God alone has the right to judge the conscience. If humans use their laws to regulate relations between individuals, God uses the laws of nature to regulate relations between individuals and God. So, no, humans can't really set barriers to their consciousness or to their thoughts, but God can see this, and God can judge, and God sets these barriers of how far we're gonna think and how conscious we're gonna be at a certain time. So it's not forever, but at the moment, what should we be exposed to and what should we might not be exposed to yet? Question 835. What is the result of barriers to freedom of conscience? And the spirits answered, it constrains individuals to act against their own way of thinking, turning them into hypocrites. Freedom of conscience is one of the characteristics of true civilization and progress. So to have a barrier of your freedom of conscience means that people are going to act against their own way of thinking. They're just going to be kind of like robots doing what's told to them. And maybe what if it's a not so nice and spirit that's influencing them, that's giving them certain thoughts. So that's not going to turn them to the right path and turning them into thinking only one thing, and even hypocrites doing one thing but saying another, or thinking something but doing another. So the freedom of consciousness is one of those characteristics that once we have that, we'll be truly civilized and progressed, when we're all thinking freely and being conscious. So that's where we'll leave off today, but before we leave off, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations for today's date, June 26th. This one's titled, Seeing Beauty. I never saw an ugly thing in my life, for let the form of an object be what it may, light, shadow, and perspective will always make it beautiful. Beauty and ugliness really are in the eye of the beholder. We can dismiss things in our lives as flawed and ugly, or we can choose to see them in a different light that reveals their strength and beauty. If I'm tempted to dismiss something or someone as not worthy of my time, I will give to them a second look from a different perspective. I may have found someone uninteresting because I simply wasn't asking the right questions. And before we leave off today, I'd like just to remind you all of the first International Youth Spiritist Weekend that we're having July 6th through 8th in Washington, D.C. And it'll be a fun weekend for us to unite as Spiritist teens, as Spiritist youth, and come together to talk about problems that we're having in the world and come up with solutions and how we can fix it. And hopefully these solutions can actually make an impact. And also on the 8th, we'll be participating in a charity event. So if you guys want to sign up, please feel free to email me at cardiacradioforteens@gmail.com or go to the website www.cardiacradio.com and we'll get back to you right away. I'm Bia, and this has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening. This has been Cardiac Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.